What do you do when the person who is supposed to be your family becomes a stranger? And what happens when that stranger decides you are worthless, disposable, something to be broken and swept aside? This is a story about what lies beneath the surface, about the quiet strength that is so often mistaken for weakness, and about the moment one man, left with nothing, discovered he had everything he ever needed. This is the story of Liam. Liam was a quiet soul in a loud world. He moved through life with a gentle deference, his shoulders slightly stooped, not from weakness, but from a lifelong habit of trying to take up less space. He was the younger brother to Chloe, a woman who burned as brightly as a firework, all dazzling sparks and loud declarations. Liam was the steady, quiet earth she launched from. He had always admired her, loved her fiercely, and believed his role was to be her silent, unwavering support. His hands, calloused and skilled from his passion for woodworking, were better at creating than applauding. He could take a raw, splintered block of maple and find the smooth, elegant lines of a bird hidden within it, but he struggled to find the right words at a dinner party. He lived in a small apartment above a dusty carpentry shop, the scent of cedar and sawdust clinging to him like a second skin. It was his sanctuary, a place where his quiet work spoke volumes. Then came Mark. Mark was everything Liam was not. He was a symphony of expensive cologne, confident laughter, and polished anecdotes. A successful investment banker, he strode into the family's life and swept Chloe off her feet with whirlwind trips and glittering promises. To everyone, he was perfect. A prince for their princess. But Liam saw something else. He saw it in the flash of irritation in Mark's eyes when a waiter was too slow, the tight grip on Chloe's arm when she laughed too long with an old friend, the subtle way he would cut Liam off mid-sentence with a dismissive smirk. It was a coldness, a brittle control that lay just beneath the charming veneer. Liam tried to voice his concern once, gently, carefully. They were at a family barbecue, the air thick with the smell of grilled food and forced pleasantries. Liam found Chloe alone in the kitchen. "He just seems intense," Liam had whispered, his gaze fixed on a knot in the wooden countertop. "I just want you to be happy." Chloe had stiffened, pulling her hand away as if he'd burned her. "Intense? You mean successful? Driven? Things you wouldn't understand, Liam. He loves me. You're just jealous because you're still messing around with wood scraps in that dusty room of yours." The words were a slap, but the real violence was yet to come. Later that evening, after most guests had left, Liam was cleaning up in the yard. Mark cornered him near the unlit fire pit. The evening chill had set in, but the heat rolling off Mark was palpable. "I heard you were running your mouth to Chloe," Mark said, his voice a low growl. He stepped closer, invading Liam's space, his expensive suit seeming to suck all the air from around them. "You think you have the right to an opinion about me? You, who are nothing. A ghost." Her charity case brothers. Liam stood his ground, his hands clenched at his sides. "I was just looking out for my sister." Mark let out a short, ugly laugh. "She doesn't need you looking out for her. She has me. You need to learn your place." And then it happened. It wasn't a fight. It was an annihilation. Mark's fist connected with Liam's jaw with a sickening crack. The world tilted, a kaleidoscope of patio lights and dark sky. Another blow struck his ribs, stealing his breath, and he crumpled to the manicured lawn. Pain erupted, sharp and blinding. Through a swimming haze, he saw Mark standing over him, adjusting his cuffs, his face a mask of detached contempt. "Stay out of my life," Mark hissed, before turning and walking back into the warm, bright house, leaving Liam broken in the darkness. The hospital was a sterile, white purgatory. The fluorescent lights hummed a relentless, monotonous tune that seemed to mock the chaos screaming inside Liam's head. His jaw was wired shut, a cage of metal that mirrored the prison his own body had become. A deep, angry purple bloomed across his torso, a painful map of Mark's rage. Every breath was a shallow, agonizing effort. But the physical pain, as immense as it was a dull echo compared to the screaming void of betrayal that had opened up inside him. He had been left on the lawn until a neighbor, taking out their trash, had found him. No one from inside the house had come. Not Chloe. The thought was a shard of glass twisting in his gut. Through the fog of painkillers and misery, a single, desperate hope remained. A misunderstanding. She must not have known how bad it was. Mark must have lied to her. With trembling fingers, his left hand clumsy and weak, he managed to pull his phone from the plastic bag of his belongings. His thumb hovered over his sister's name. The 3 letters, CHLOE, that had once meant safety and home, now looked alien and threatening. He typed a simple, garbled message, his one good hand shaking. In hospital. He hurt me bad, he sent it, his heart pounding against his fractured ribs. He stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 little dots that would signal her reply, her panic, her love. He imagined her horrified gasp, her immediate rush to his side, the tearful apologies for ever doubting him. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of the clock on the wall a hammer blow to his fragile hope. Then, his phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text. His breath hitched. He squinted at the screen, the small, black letters coming into focus. It was from Chloe. 6 words that would shatter what was left of his world. This was your fault. You provoked him. The phone slipped from his numb fingers and clattered to the linoleum floor. The screen remained lit, casting a pale, merciless glow on the ceiling. Your fault. You provoked him. The words weren't just a defense of her fiancé, they were a verdict. They were the sound of a door slamming shut, locking him out in the cold forever. In that moment, the physical assault felt like a prelude. The real attack was this message. Mark had broken his body, but his sister, his Chloe, had just broken his soul. The humming of the lights grew louder, the white walls closed in, and Liam realized with a devastating certainty that he was utterly and completely alone. The world outside the hospital room moved on, but for Liam, time fractured. The weeks that followed were a blur of painful physical therapy and a profound, crushing silence. His jaw slowly healed, but the words he might have spoken felt lodged in his throat, heavy and useless. His family did not call. Chloe's number remained a dead zone of indifference. The barbecue, the assault, the text message, it was as if they had collectively decided that he, Liam, had ceased to exist. Because his injuries made it impossible to work, he lost his job at the high-end furniture company where he had been a finisher. The small savings he had carefully accumulated dwindled with alarming speed, eaten away by rent and basic needs. He was forced to move out of his small apartment, the sanctuary above the shop, and into a bleak, single room in a run-down boarding house. The smell of cedar and potential was replaced by the damp, musty scent of decay and forgotten lives. He was adrift. An invisible man haunted by the ghost of a family he no longer had. The only solace he found was in a small, splintered block of pine he had salvaged before he left his old life behind. In the dim light of his new room, he would sit for hours with his one trusted tool, a small carving knife. His hands, still stiff and aching, slowly began to move with their old, familiar grace. He carved, not to create a product, but to process the pain. He carved the anger into the sharp angles of a bird's wing. He carved the sorrow into the gentle curve of its back. He smoothed the betrayal into a flawless, polished surface, as if by sanding the wood he could somehow sand away the raw edges of his own heart. This small wooden bird became his confidant, the silent witness to his grief. He poured all the words he couldn't speak into its grain. It was a tangible piece of his survival, a testament that even when everything is taken from you, the ability to create, to make something whole and beautiful out of brokenness, remains. It was during this bleak period that a letter arrived, a formal, cream-colored envelope that felt jarringly out of place in his grim surroundings. It was from a pro bono legal service he had been referred to by a social worker at the hospital. He had forgotten he'd even filled out the paperwork. He was being assigned a lawyer. A Mr. Arthur Harrison. The name sounded old and expensive, and Liam felt a surge of hopelessness. What could a lawyer do? The battle had already been lost, not in a courtroom, but in a text message. Still, a flicker of something, maybe not hope, but a stubborn refusal to completely disappear, made him go. The law offices of Harrison and Finch were a world away from his boarding house. It was a realm of polished mahogany, hushed tones, and the quiet hum of immense power. Liam, in his worn-out jacket and faded jeans, felt like a weed that had sprouted through a marble floor. He was led into a corner office with a view that stretched across the entire city, a city that had become profoundly indifferent to his existence. Mr. Harrison was exactly as Liam had pictured, older, with a mane of silver hair, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed like a part of his own skin. He didn't rise when Liam entered. He simply gestured to a leather chair, his eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanning Liam with a practiced, dispassionate gaze. He looked bored, as if Liam were just another unfortunate file in a tall stack of human misery. "Liam Carter," Harrison said, his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. He glanced at the file on his desk. Assault and battery. Family dispute. Your sister's fiancé. He spoke the facts as if they were inventory items. Messy. Liam said nothing. His jaw was still tight, and speaking felt like a chore. He simply clutched the small wooden bird in his pocket, its smooth surface a familiar anchor in this alien environment. Harrison sighed, a barely audible sound of professional weariness. He'd seen this 100 times. He said, "Look, Mr. Carter. In these situations, the other party will claim provocation. It becomes a he said a scenario. They have money. You, I presume, do not. We can push for a small settlement to cover your medical bills, but you should be prepared for the fact that they will drag your name through the mud." The lawyer's words were pragmatic, logical, and utterly deflating. He was offering a managed defeat, a quiet surrender. He was telling Liam to accept his place as the nothing Mark had called him. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy. Mr. Harrison leaned back, ready to wrap things up, to move on to the next file, the next case. He was about to offer some final, sterile advice when he noticed Liam's hand. He wasn't fidgeting. He was holding something. A small, dark object that he was turning over and over. "What's in your hand?" Harrison asked, his curiosity piqued for the first time. Liam slowly opened his palm. Resting in the center was the wooden bird, its pine grain glowing warmly even in the office's cool light. It was exquisitely made, impossibly detailed. The feathers seemed to ripple, the head was cocked with a lifelike curiosity, and the entire form radiated a sense of peace and resilience. Harrison, a collector of art in his private life, leaned forward, his professional mask momentarily forgotten. "Did you buy this?" Liam finally found his voice, though it was raspy from disuse. "No," he said softly. "I made it." Harrison stared from the bird to the young man sitting before him, a man who looked defeated and broken. But the bird told a different story. It spoke of patience, of vision, of a deep, unshakable core of artistry and strength. It was not the creation of a nothing. It was the work of a survivor. A creator. A quiet virtuoso. The lawyer's gaze sharpened, but the boredom was gone, replaced by a new, intense focus. He looked at Liam, truly looked at him for the first time, past the worn-out clothes and the lingering bruises. He saw the dignity in his posture, the profound sadness in his eyes, and the strength in the hands that could create such beauty from a block of wood. The case was no longer messy. It was an injustice. "Tell me everything," Mr. Harrison said, his voice now carrying a weight it had lacked before. "From the very beginning. And don't leave a single detail out." For Liam, it was like a dam breaking. He spoke for over an hour, the words tumbling out, hesitant at first, then steady and clear. He spoke of his love for his sister, his quiet observations of Mark, the chilling condescension, the assault, and finally, the 6 words on the phone screen that had gutted him. He explained how he'd lost his job, his home, his family. Through it all, he held the wooden bird, a silent testament to his story. When he finished, the office was quiet again, but the atmosphere had transformed. The professional distance was gone. Arthur Harrison, the cynical, world-weary lawyer, felt a stir of something he hadn't felt in years: righteous anger. This wasn't just a case about a broken jaw. It was about a broken system, where wealth and arrogance could bulldoze quiet decency without consequence. It was about a man like Mark who destroyed things, and a man like Liam who built them. "They will not get away with this," Harrison said, his voice a low, firm promise. "They think their money makes them invincible. They are about to discover how wrong they are." The shark had found its purpose. Harrison mobilized his entire firm. What began as a pro bono case became the office's primary focus. Private investigators, usually reserved for high-stakes corporate litigation, were dispatched. They were quiet, thorough, and invisible. They began to dig into Mark's perfectly curated life, looking for the cracks beneath the polish. And they found them. They found a former assistant who had been fired after refusing Mark's advances, silenced with a hefty non-disclosure agreement and a cash settlement. They found a bartender from a high-end club who remembered Mark getting aggressive, his face turning purple with rage over a perceived slight. They even unearthed a sealed juvenile record from his prestigious boarding school, an incident involving another student and a dispute that had ended with the other boy in the infirmary and a significant donation made to the school's library fund by Mark's father. A pattern emerged, clear and undeniable. It was a life story of unchecked aggression, of problems solved not with remorse, but with money and power. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall Harrison was building around Mark. Meanwhile, Harrison worked with Liam. He didn't just prepare him for legal proceedings, he helped him rebuild his confidence. He commissioned Liam to create a large wooden sculpture for the firm's lobby, paying him a generous advance that allowed Liam to find a small, decent apartment with enough space for a proper workshop. For the first time in months, Liam was surrounded by the scent of sawdust and the promise of creation. He began to work, his hands moving with renewed purpose. The sculpture he designed was of a great oak tree, its roots deep and tangled, its branches reaching defiantly for the sky. It was a symbol of his own quiet resilience. As the legal storm gathered, Chloe was living in a gilded cage. She inhabited Mark's penthouse apartment, a sterile space of glass and chrome that felt more like a museum than a home. She wore the expensive clothes he bought her, repeated the justifications he fed her. Liam was always so sensitive, she would tell herself, her reflection staring back from a cold, minimalist mirror. "Mark has a temper, but he's passionate. He was protecting me, but the lies were becoming thin, worn out from overuse." She saw the way Mark spoke to the cleaning staff, his voice dripping with disdain. She felt a jolt of fear when he slammed his fist on the table because his favorite team lost a game. These were small things, but they were echoes of the violence she refused to acknowledge. The text message she had sent her brother played on a loop in her mind during quiet moments. "This was your fault." She had typed it in a blind panic, desperate to believe the man she loved, desperate to secure her place in the glittering world he offered. But with every passing day, the words felt less like a defense and more like a betrayal of everything she once was. She was a stranger to herself. She had chosen the predator over her own blood. A formal notice for a deposition arrived, and the fragile world she had built began to tremble. Mark laughed it off. "A legal shakedown," he scoffed. "That pathetic brother of yours is looking for a payday. Don't worry, darling. My lawyers will crush him." But Chloe saw the flicker of fear in his eyes, and for the first time, she realized she was not on the side of the strong, but on the side of the cruel. The day of the deposition was cold and gray, the sky the color of slate. The conference room was as sterile as the hospital room where Liam had woken up alone. Liam sat on one side of the vast mahogany table, dressed in a simple but new suit that Mr. Harrison had insisted on buying for him. He was no longer the hunched, defeated man who had first walked into the lawyer's office. His posture was straight, his gaze clear. Next to him, Arthur Harrison was a picture of calm, formidable power. On the other side sat Mark, flanked by two aggressive-looking lawyers. He smirked at Liam, a look of pure contempt. Chloe sat beside him, pale and drawn, her eyes fixed on the polished surface of the table, unable to look at her brother. Mark's lawyer began with an aggressive line of questioning, trying to paint Liam as a jealous, unstable freeloader who had provoked the attack. Liam answered each question calmly and honestly, his voice steady. He did not rise to the bait. Then, it was Harrison's turn. He rose slowly, his presence filling the room. He didn't address Mark. He began by placing a series of photographs on the table. They were pictures of Liam's injuries, the bruised ribs, the swollen and wired jaw. "These are the results of a provocation," Harrison asked quietly, his voice resonating with authority. He then turned to Mark. His questions were like a surgeon's scalpel, precise and cutting. "Mr. Jennings, is it your standard practice to respond to a conversation with multiple fractures?" He brought up the bartender, the former assistant and her NDA. The incident at boarding school. With each question, a piece of Mark's composure chipped away. His face grew tight, his confident smirk melting into a snarl. "These are lies. Ambushes," he sputtered, his lawyers trying in vain to restrain him. Finally, Harrison picked up a single sheet of paper. It was a printout of the text message. He slid it across the table until it stopped directly in front of Chloe. Her breath caught in her throat. "Ms. Carter," Harrison said, his voice now gentle but relentless. "This message. This was your fault. You provoked him. You sent this to your brother while he was in the hospital, alone, with his jaw wired shut because of the man sitting next to you. I have just one question. Do you still believe it was his fault?" The room was silent. Every eye was on Chloe. Mark shot her a look of pure venom, a silent command to stay loyal. But she could no longer hold up the facade. She looked at the text message, then finally, she lifted her head and looked at Liam. She saw not the failure she had tried to imagine, but the brother she had loved, the quiet, steady boy who had always been her anchor. She saw the pain in his eyes, a pain she had personally inflicted, and something inside her broke. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, then another. A choked sob escaped her lips. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It wasn't his fault. It was never his fault." The admission hung in the air, a confession that shattered Mark's entire defense. He erupted. "You stupid, weak woman," he screamed, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He lunged across the table, not at Liam, but at Chloe. Before anyone could react, Harrison's investigators, who had been waiting outside, entered the room and swiftly restrained him. In that single, explosive moment, Mark revealed his true self to the world. The case was over. There was no trial. Mark's lawyers, faced with overwhelming evidence and their client's public implosion, pushed for a massive settlement. But for Liam, it was never about the money. It was about the truth. Months later, sunlight streamed through the large windows of a bustling workshop. The air was rich with the smell of freshly cut oak and varnish. At the center of it all stood Liam, his face calm and focused, guiding the hand of a young teenager on a lathe. The settlement money had not been used for revenge or luxury. He had used it to open the Phoenix Workshop, a non-profit organization that taught woodworking skills to at-risk youth. He was giving them what he had given himself, a way to build something beautiful and strong out of the raw, splintered pieces of their lives. The magnificent oak tree sculpture he had carved now stood proudly in the lobby of Harrison and Finch, a permanent symbol of resilience. He and Arthur Harrison had become unlikely friends, the old lawyer often visiting the workshop, finding a sense of peace there that his own world of conflict could not provide. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was painfully familiar. It was from Chloe. He opened it and read her long, rambling apology, a letter filled with shame, regret, and a desperate plea for a forgiveness he wasn't sure he was ready to give. She had left Mark that day and had started therapy, trying to understand how she had lost herself so completely. He folded the letter and placed it on his workbench, next to the small, perfect wooden bird that had started it all. He didn't know if he could ever let her back into his life, but he felt a sense of peace. The rage was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of his work and the laughter of the students in his shop. He had faced the worst of human cruelty and betrayal, and he had not only survived, he had transformed. He had learned that your worth is not determined by the people who fail to see it. It is forged in silence, in resilience, and in the courageous act of creating light in the darkest of places. So I ask you, look around at the quiet people in your life. The ones who don't demand the spotlight, the ones who speak with their actions more than their words. Their strength may not be loud, but it is often the most profound. True value isn't something that can be bought or shouted, it's something that is built, piece by piece, with quiet dignity and an unbreakable spirit. Share this story if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen. Remind someone today that even after the harshest winter, a forest can grow again, stronger and more beautiful than before.